Hello and welcome back to the Pixel Tea. Good to see you here, Landry. Modern Men Lost Again. Thanks for stopping by and saying hello. Kate, thank you for stopping by. Good to see you. This has been a very interesting week for me. I could tell you that's for sure. If you could let me know if my mic is okay, if you can hear me okay. If the music's too loud, I'd appreciate it. I'll turn it down. Like I said, it's been a very interesting week for me on this online space. I'm generally a person that likes to stay here in this chat, and I don't really spend a lot of time on panels, and this week I have, and it's been a lot of fun. And I've just really seen such a different perspective being in this space. And quite truthfully, I could see why people really enjoy it and kind of get addicted to it, because it is such an interesting dynamic having conversations with people. So I just want to say, hey girl, what's up? Miss Cynthia, thank you so much, girl. I'm glad to see you over here. So let's get to this. I just want to say again, welcome everybody. And tonight I'm going to talk about something that affects all of us in these online spaces and these conversations. And, I was looking into the way we pride, aggression, and insecurity and how it shapes what we see and how we respond in this space. And quite truthfully, I've noticed in this age of online gurus and these echo chambers that we create, the greatest act of rebellion, I think, is to think for yourself. When fear and loyalty and shame are used to bind the mind. And I've noticed that that's not what we consider truth. And I looked closer into the aspect of it being programming. And I've noticed that the wisdom within me, is it really recruiting it? Because experiencing it, I think, has helped to liberate me in this space. And I also want to start by saying this: what we experience online is often not what it seems. There's a hierarchy we're all asked to recognize and follow, but that hierarchy, I've recognized that it's a social mirage. And the loudest voices you hear, sometimes they're just the mirrors of fear and of ego. So I hope that by the end of this stream, I want you to leave with perhaps a clearer understanding of how to, and through my experience, navigate these spaces consciously, not just as a participant in chaos, but as an observer, and to master your own mind. I want to speak briefly about something I've been witnessing in a few of these online spaces, something that mirrors larger social patterns we see everywhere. When conversations that should be about learning or connection start turning into systems of obedience and secrecy and control. And that's not what we consider community, online or in our real lives, but that those things that I just touched on are also forms of manipulation. It often begins with a charismatic leadership, right? Exclusive language about having special truths and demand for loyalty over our own honesty sometimes. Money and status and access become tools of control. And soon people are pressured to comply rather than think freely. I've noticed that these aggressive speakers operate from the limbic system, a flight or flight. Staying calm activates your prefrontal cortex, the seat of higher reasoning. By keeping your composure, you demonstrate the very integration that they are lacking. The limbic system is the part of the brain that governs emotion, our survival instincts, and our immediate reactions. When someone feels challenged or criticized or threatened, this system fires up almost instantly. Before their rational brain, the prefrontal cortex, has a chance to evaluate the situation. And what's happening is that neurobiologically, it's that this person's amygdala is signaling that I'm losing power, regain control. Their nervous system interprets disagreements as danger. The conversation becomes about survival and not understanding. And those of you who are tuning in, I know that adventure these spaces with me. And I think that you can all think of an example of what I'm describing. When the amygdala becomes overstimulated, such as during online arguments, when we have experiences of humiliation or dominance, these dominant contests, it hijacks the prefrontal cortex. And this is called the amygdala hijack, the point where reason shuts down and emotional reactivity, it takes over. That's why online panels full of shouting and posturing feel chaotic. Everyone's limbic systems are in control. And the higher brain, it becomes offline. And this is not strength, spiritually, or what we call enlightenment. It's an old hierarchy repeating itself in a new medium, a mirage of power built on fear and dependence. And real awareness doesn't demand worship. Real teaching, it doesn't hide in secret channels. And these real truths, it doesn't need to control or silence anyone. Perhaps real truth doesn't need to control or silence anyone. And to anyone who feels uneasy or manipulated in a group like this, trust that instinct, folks. Step back and breathe and talk to someone outside of the circle that you're experiencing this in. And you don't owe obedience to anyone claiming ownership of your mind or your voice in this space. Online spaces should be places of dialogue and not domination. The way forward is clarity and compassion and transparency, not these secret hierarchies or this act of intimidation. So I encourage you, let's keep choosing communities that empower rather than exploit. And let's keep our awareness intact, our autonomy whole, and our conversations rooted in respect in this space online and in your lives, whether it be in politics, in your workspace, or even in your families. I've noticed how often the phrase higher consciousness, right, is used as this costume that people put on for their egos. Some people speak of awakening while behaving in ways that are anything but that. Through their aggression and this competition and slander and these lies. In my opinion, true consciousness doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't attack, it doesn't control or compete. It observes, and it integrates and it uplifts. The louder someone declares their enlightenment while tearing others down, the clearer it becomes that they are not rising in awareness. They're sinking into performance. Which is why I took a deep look at myself in this online mirror this week. And I kept saying that I got out of my comfort zone of these echo chambers that I've been staying in throughout the years. So I recognize that awareness isn't about image and it's not about intellect. I think it has more to do about a person's integrity. You can't claim higher consciousness while acting from these lower motives that I just described. This contradiction exposed itself in my own behavior. And sometimes the most awakened thing you can do is to quietly step away from those who confuse domination with depth. Let me take a second and check out this chat. Oh, I'm so glad that you're appreciating the visuals. I like a little bit of visual eye candy myself. So thank you for the feedback. I appreciate that. Hey girl, mindful exposures, Ezra, resonance frequency girl is in the house. You know that it is when it comes to you and I and others in this space. We have to talk about these things. We have to bring more awareness to these types of conversations because unfortunately, when we try to have these conversations in other places, we get torn down, we get shunned and all of that. So here in this space, I have for myself, I'm going to talk about it. Thank you, Landry. I appreciate it. Thank you for that feedback as well. Good. I'm glad to hear that you're seizure free. That's a big deal. I haven't talked to you for about a week and we need to have a conversation. Okay, so let's get back to this. So I'm aware of the attention that I receive in this space, and it can be flattering. But let's be clear. Projection is not connection. What some call attraction is often confusion and insecurity, especially when I don't respond in the way that they expect. I've learned that when a woman holds her boundaries, she's called manipulative. When she speaks clearly, sometimes she can be called a Jezebel. And those labels, they don't define me. They reveal the fear of those who use those words. And I don't play into the domination or submission. I speak from a place of awareness. And that's not seduction, okay? That's sovereignty. And I want to clarify something about language because words are being used as symbolic weapons in here. And yes, they are. I'm not going to pretend or let somebody gaslight me and tell me that it's not. The term feminist, often thrown at women on online, it dismisses the logic, right? It challenges authority or it silences awareness, regardless of what the person actually believes. And historically, feminism refers to advocacy of equality for women in social and political and economic spheres. It is about rights and opportunity, not ego, aggression, or rebellion for its own sake. What I embody in these conversations is awareness and discernment and integrity, and not a political label. I am speaking from logic, observation, and clarity. I am not seeking to dominate. I'm not seeking to demand these rights or to disrupt society in the way some understand feminism as an identity weaponized online. My stance is about truth and presence and navigating social dynamics consciously, which is a human quality and not a political one. When someone calls my reasoning or boundaries feminist as if it is an insult, it is a projection of discomfort with women who hold awareness and self-sovereignty. They are conflating self-possession with ideology. I am not advocating for an agenda. I am exercising clarity and communication, protecting myself from manipulation, and observing social dynamics for insight, as are many of you. That is neither radical nor ideological. It is conscious and awareness in practice. The misuse of the word feminist here is a tactic to silence or misrepresent me. And I reject the label as it being applied because my focus is not on politics or identity. I'm going to say it again. It is on truth and discernment and integrity and conversation in these online spaces and in my social engagements outside of this online space. It's interesting to me how some people disguise control as divine masculinity. They call a woman traumatized the moment she sets a boundary or doesn't submit. But real divine masculine energy doesn't need to dominate or diagnose. It protects, respects, and meets awareness with awareness. My ability to discern manipulation isn't trauma. I'd like to think that it's healing in action. And let's also address this. Maternal instinct is not weakness. In fact, it is one of the most profound expressions of awareness. Why? Because intuition and protective clarity a person can embody, yet in spaces dominated by ego and aggression and insecurity by some men, shaped by their own trauma, I think they're deprived of healthy examples. And they perceive this instinct as threatening or what they call soft. The ability to sense danger, protect the vulnerable, and respond with compassion while maintaining boundaries is not weakness. I'd like to think that it's mastery. It requires courage to stand firm, to discern truth from manipulation, and to act from both heart and mind. When maternal intuition is mislabeled as manipulative, emotional, or controlling, it reveals more about the observer than the person embodying it. It exposes their fear of accountability, of genuine care, and of energy that it can't be dominated. True strength does not dismiss care or awareness as weakness. It recognizes that nurturing discernment, protective insight, and calm guidance are essential to survival and growth. In online spaces, in society, and within oneself. Maternal instinct is a force of clarity, a shield against manipulation, and a mirror for the unseen consequences of ego-driven behavior. Those who mistake it for weakness are often the ones unhealed, reacting to the strength they do not yet even understand themselves. So these maternal instincts are often misunderstood in aggressive, ego-driven spaces by some of these men. I mentioned it earlier. It's shaped by their trauma and deprived of healthy examples of care and protection. I've noticed they consistently call it manipulative and emotional or overbearing, but nothing could be further from the truth. Maternal instinct, again, it's clarity, it's discernment, it is the courage to protect the vulnerable. I'm going to say it again. When a woman embodies this instinct and sensing danger, guiding wisely and holding space with care, she's not submitting. We have to, as women, we have to master this awareness. This awareness of what I mentioned earlier, of balancing the heart and the mind and exposing patterns of manipulation and pride. That's what we have to teach when we become mothers, or we're in positions of being role models. If you're an auntie, if you're a grandmother. If someone calls that instinct threatening, it is not the instinct that is flawed. It is their perception that is flawed. They are reacting to the energy, that energy that they do not even understand themselves. And their fear is the reflection, not a judgment of worth. And I need this to be said, true strength does not dismiss care as weakness. No! Doggone it. Mr. Dog, do you mind? As per usual, there is somebody here visiting, and all of the doggy brigade has something to say about it. So I apologize. Where was I? Let me think. Where was I? Let's see here. I'm not rejecting this divine masculine energy, okay? I'm rejecting the manipulation when somebody says it to me. A healthy masculine presence doesn't use spiritual language to bypass accountability or control a woman's boundaries, okay? And perhaps some are confusing this conscious strength with control. And true strength protects, it doesn't possess. I think it's important. It doesn't possess. I personally have endured an abundance of pushback from insecure men who often perform online in ways designed to dominate attention. By their yelling, their projecting, their interruptions, or overspeaking to manipulate the audience. What may seem like strength or this charisma, I think that it's shown me to be frequently an abundance of insecurity in disguise by that behavior. And I've learned that these tactics are intentional. They're aimed to control the narrative and draw focus to themselves and create a hierarchy that positions them as authority while undermining others. They exploit social dynamics, emotional triggers, and the human tendency to respond to volume with this compliance that they're demanding from us. And projection. Ugh, we use this word a lot in this space. Let me check out this chat. I agree with you. A healthy masculine energy or language doesn't need to use words to express itself at all. I agree with you, Landry. Hi, Logical Spark. Good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. So again, let's get back to this word projection that's used a lot in this space. I've learned that it's another tool, this word projection. By labeling others as manipulative, aggressive, or problematic, they externalize their own patterns and avoid accountability. They turn boundaries and discernment and awareness, particularly from women or those who refuse to submit, into evidence of threat or resistance. Overspeaking and interrupting are not signs of knowledge. They're strategies to monopolize attention. The audience is often split, right? And it's pulled into what we call this drama, the word drama. They pull it in and it becomes a competition, and then the confusion starts while the manipulator claims this superiority. The louder the performance, the less clarity there is. And truthfully, both genders behave like this in this online space. So just in my opinion, when it gets louder and louder, you cannot even hear what's even being said. There's so much loss in translation between the people that are yelling at each other and for the audience to even comprehend what's going on. It just becomes noise. My awareness, I feel, is the antidote. Seeing these patterns clearly and recognizing this mirage of dominance and the mirror of projection allows the observer to remain grounded. I try to stay as grounded as I can be in this space. And I try to be this calm presence, and I hope that it neutralizes the chaos, and it seems to have worked this week. Silence and boundaries and measured speech disrupt attempts at this aim of control. Real authority online is not volume or aggression. It is the clarity and the integrity and the discernment. The moment we mistake noise for the truth, we allow manipulation to define the perception of the conversation. By remaining aware, by observing patterns without reacting to these people's egos, we reclaim attention and we restore the balance. In other words, we see that this performance is temporary, but clarity and presence are permanent. So my clarity is permanent in this space. I am recognizing the tactics of insecure, manipulative voices and their hostility. It is the mastery of this awareness that I've received in this time in my life, and the first step toward maintaining the sovereignty that I demand in any online space. So, something else that I've recognized, the dangers of using chart reading and cosmology as spiritual warfare in this space. The misuse of cosmology as spiritual warfare online mirrors this patriarchal, hierarchical, and trauma driven dynamics that suppress awareness and autonomy in this space. True cosmology, like true spirituality, is about this integration I keep speaking about, humility and liberation, not domination or labeling. When astrology, birth charts, or cosmology are weaponized, they stop being tools for self awareness and become instruments of projection and power in this space. Instead of the reflection, people use charts to label and diagnose or to shame others. It creates a false sense of authority, right? I know your fate. I know your weakness. Here's your karma, right? This dynamic mirrors religious control, replacing scripture with planetary symbolism. It reinforces these ego inflations in the readers, right? They're kind of playing this role of God. Not that anybody can play the role of God, but I think you guys get what I mean. It triggers submission and shame or self-doubt in the subject that they're speaking about, the person. Over time, this dynamic mirrors narcissistic abuse, and they disguise it as spiritual insight. In online spaces, cosmology and chart reading can be used to create these hierarchies. I am higher vibration because my chart says, XYZ. You're dark energy, low frequency, karmically impure, right? Your placements in the planets and in the stars explain why you're wrong. These statements disarm critical thinking and make spiritual debate one-sided, folks. This behavior mirrors religious patriarchy, using cosmic language to establish spiritual dominance. People using cosmology for warfare often interpret charts or transits through their biases, right? And they seek these patterns that confirm their assumptions, and they stop challenging them. Astrology becomes a weapon of projection and not introspection. This strengthens this idea of tribalism and suspicion and superstition rather than that awareness. It replaces the inquiry with the certainty. And this can be a dangerous inversion of true spirituality. Using these charts to attack or condemn others creates a discordant energy in the collective field, I feel. Instead of this idea of the word enlightenment, the space becomes charged with fear and guilt and division. And in my opinion, this repels the genuine healing or curiosity and connection, the very essence of the idea of the wisdom of Sophia. Energetically, spiritual warfare through cosmology keeps consciousness trapped in this ego's orbit. People who weaponize cosmology often speak as if they're channeling the divine law, when in truth, They're expressing unhealed parts of themselves. The stars told me you're deceptive. Your karma is to be punished. I have cosmic insight you lack. These are some of the examples. And truthfully, this isn't the divination. It's can be expressed as domination dressed in spiritual language. It mimics the very control systems that the Sophia archetype that I mentioned earlier and the wisdom traditions, what they warn against. And again, if this doesn't apply to you, don't worry about it. Because I've seen this idea of reading people's charts in a lot of spaces here online. Let me check out this chat. Okay. Can I ask you if this is a new revelation and what did you think before? No, I don't think that this is a new revelation for me. If anything, it's expanded more and given me a stronger feeling about it. It's confirmed my feelings about it, I guess I should say. Snow says, and hi, Miss Snow. She says, wow, I needed that reminder. I can't believe I just said that I was getting way too excited about AI. I was going to take a deeper dive into that with astronomics. Well, I mean, don't let it hold you back, sis. Okay? Just hear me out. Just hear me out is all. I love looking into myself, but it's way too quickly available to look into another person. Yeah, I agree. Modern Man Lost Again says, it is true. When people ask me about these things, I always feel uncomfortable because the only true way to utilize it is for self-understanding. That's the key, Landry. It's for self-understanding. You're correct. Wow. What are you vibrating? Dopamine trauma bond looping? Rewire your brain. Yes, Miss Esra. That's what we're taught. We're going to get deeper into this concept. You and I talk about this all the time. This is our jam. Ezra says, AI gives me that heebie-jeebie kind of vibration. No thanks. Well, but I mean, come on, Ezra. You are a learned woman that has educated yourself and you've done you've gone to school for this. But for those of us that isn't, that's not our profession, these tools of AI can perhaps put us in the right direction to do more research, right? So use it for goodness, right? Don't use it as a weapon towards others. Let's see, Snow says, I feel a sense of shame all of a sudden, only because I know how many years of studying I've done with natal charts for it to be so quickly available and know the things I know. It doesn't feel right. Oh, not at all. You shouldn't feel any shame because it goes back to what Landry said. Because these are ways to help people with looking at themselves. So I'm grateful for people that can read cosmology. It's a blessing, right? To have that awareness and that education of cosmology. It's when we use it against one another is what I have an issue with. What are my thoughts on premonitions? I have premonitions, so I do believe in them, which is why I am a little there's been others that I've wanted to ask to look into a chart for me. I've had one person do it for me so far. And I've had it done twice for me. I've had it done recently this year, and my father had it done for me when I was a young teenager. And when I was a teenager, it scared me because of how accurate it was. And for a young person, it was too much for me to accept or understand how it even worked. So I do believe in premonitions. Okay, yeah, good. Keep it up, yeah. Let's see here. GTGT says astrology, in my understanding, just charts out what path or cycles you might fall victim to. If you are living unconsciously, you are at the will of these cycles. I agree. They're all tools. They're all tools, and you can use it for good means of awareness and paths for your life. Let's see here. Here we go. However, if you are fully conscious, you determine your own path. That's correct. Landry says, I have thought the same things about tarot in my life. I hate it when people ask me to be an expert in anything because then we are no longer positioned as a learner. That's important. As long as you understand that, then, I think that you're in a good space for that. You've only had one premonition. Well, you never know what tomorrow or the day after that or the day after that is going to bring. Okay, so let's see here. Where am I at? The neuroscience connection of this astrology. When people receive cosmic condemnations online, their brains respond as if they're being socially rejected or spiritually exiled. So for the amygdala, when this happens, when a person is looking at this information, reading this information, perhaps fear and defensiveness arises when they're receiving the information. And the prefrontal cortex suppression is where the reason and the perspective may decrease. Does this make sense to you, Esra? Am I on this or am I off here? So the limbic hijacking, the mind moves into trauma response to this information, which is the freeze, fight, or fawn. And this is why spiritual warfare online, it feels so destabilizing. It literally short circuits higher reasoning and emotional balance. Does that sound about right, Esra? I feel that the true purpose of cosmology, authentic cosmology, and astrology, it was designed for, like GT said, it's this self-awareness and to integrate it into our lives and not do it based on judgment. So the purpose is to illuminate these patterns and not to imprison people in them, and to expand consciousness and not to constrict it, and to unite the microcosm and the macrocosm and not divide individuals into higher and lower beings. So when it's used ethically, this cosmology helps people to understand their psyche and to evolve. That's the goal, is to evolve. But when we misuse it, it becomes another ego tool for control of these ideas of projection and possibly a trauma reenactment. Astrology and cosmology are sacred languages of pattern and potential, and they're not weapons. When we use them to shame and to diagnose or to dominate, we turn this wisdom into warfare. True spiritual awareness invites this reflection and not to fear it. It, again, with the word integration, it integrates the stars and the self rather than using them to rule others. So the wisdom without this compassion is control, and control is the opposite of consciousness. So let's get back to this term of divine masculine. Let's check this chat for just a moment. I think it's fascinating because astrology shows us that we all have different aspects of ourselves, but in different places that manifest and present in different ways. That's pretty insightful, Landry. Have I heard of the human design? Well, yes, of course, but you have to be... There's human design in all cultures and creation stories and religions. For sure, I've heard of this, of a human design. GT says, luckily your personality is not you. It just takes a bit of time to realize that. I'm laughing because I'm in that phase. So that kind of tickled my spirit a little bit. That was a clever statement. Landry says, I found it fascinating because it talked about the way in which you eat being as important what you eat. Yes. There are people that are so good with this cosmology that they can give you, they can even create a diet for you. What vegetables, which fruits to help you in your sign with the sun and the moon and the stars, what vitamins you need, what nutrients you need in this time when you're strong or when you're weaker. It's pretty fascinating. There's so much to it. I'm not an expert at it, but I enjoy learning about it. But okay, so let's get back to this this term of divine masculine and divine feminine that gets thrown around in this space. We've all become experts at this spiritual language. Well, we really haven't, but we like to throw around these buzz phrases and words, okay? So the terms divine masculine and divine feminine once described the sacred balance of creation. It focuses on flow and structure and spirit, but somewhere along the way, the language was hijacked. Online, I see these words twisted into these hierarchies. Men using divine masculine to justify control, and women being told that resistance means that they're unhealed or traumatized, that it isn't divinity, that it's ego wearing spiritual clothing. I experienced that this week. It was pretty pathetic. True sacred polarity is not about gender, it's about energy. The solar and the lunar, the steady and the intuitive, the giving and the receiving, each lives inside all of us. Conscious strength, when embodied, it doesn't dominate, it protects. Sacred receptivity. It doesn't submit. It flows with awareness. La-di-da, la-di-da, this word awareness. I'm going to use it probably 500 times tonight. When someone says, you can't handle divine masculine energy, Yolanda, what they often mean is, I want control and your boundaries challenge me. That's what it means, right? But awareness doesn't bow to control. My awareness, I'm not going to bow to this control. Instead, it exposes it, right? The real evolution of this masculine is this presence without the pride, and the feminine intuition without the fear. And together they create harmony and not hierarchy. So I no longer speak of divine masculine or divine feminine. I speak of conscious strength and sacred flow. I speak of the inner marriage between this clarity and compassion between mind and heart. When we master that balance within, no one can use spiritual language to manipulate us again. And that's what I'm experiencing for myself. These people are no longer manipulate me in this space. The true sacred union is not between people, it's within the self, between awareness and embodiment of it. Okay. So let's get more into some metaphors. The mirage is this illusion of hierarchy online. I keep using this word hierarchy for a reason. Someone may seem dominant, authoritative, or persuasive, but it's often attention and not truth that gives them power. The louder someone is, the more you might feel compelled to listen. But notice this, the mirage vanishes when the attention shifts. And this online power, it's temporary, socially constructed, and entirely dependent on the collective perception. I've been using this term mirror this week. So let's talk about this. The mirror of aggression and pride and manipulation in these spaces are often reflections of our own insecurities or the insecurities of others. That's why I talked about projection earlier. When someone attacks or interrupts or manipulates, they are holding up a mirror, not revealing your weaknesses, but exposing patterns of fear and ego within themselves. So those of you who are new to this or may have not seen this like this, perceived it like this, the moment you recognize the mirror and the mirage, you step outside of this illusion that these people create for you in these spaces. You see clearly without needing to even react to their nonsense. And that is where the true power lives, in yourself. So first, the mirage. The online hierarchies appear real in these spaces, right? We create these ideas of these lands and these cosplay, right? Someone seems dominant and authoritative or persuasive, but it's often attention, not truth, that gives them that power. I said that earlier. The louder and the faster or more aggressive someone is, the more we feel compelled to follow this person. Why? So let's go back to the mirror of the pride and the manipulation. They aren't just actions of others, they are the reflections of the fear and insecurity of the ego. I'm going to repeat this over and over again tonight. When we react, we step into the mirror and become part of this person's projection. So it's like this Alice in the Looking Glass. Seeing the mirage in the mirror is the first step in stepping outside of this illusion that these people have created in this space. That awareness is the tool that frees you from reactive loops. You observe without being drawn in to their bullshit. And that calm and clarity arrives and it emerges when you see it. So let's tie this back to the brain. So the prefrontal cortex, the executive center, correct me if I'm wrong, Esra, allows self-reflection, awareness, and decision-making. And online, when aggression and pride spike, our limbic system triggers the reactivity, the fear, and the anger, and the envy. Before I go deeper into this, let's check out this chat. Thank you for dropping my links, Miss Esra. I appreciate that. Yeah. Okay. Snow says, there's nothing but mirrors on that damn channel. It's nasty work. It's incredible. I'm even nice. I could totally mirror the hell out of some of these people. Well, then you seem to be an expert and know what you're doing out in this space, Miss Snowfire. You know when to be snow and you know when to be fire. And as long as you're comfortable in that space, more power to you. Dopamine looping comes in many formats. Yes, it does, Miss Esra. Yes, we are going to talk about how some people weaponize this mirror concept. It happens to us daily on here. I don't even need to mention any names. We already know who this could apply to in this space. Okay. So let's get back to this. So what was I talking about? The brain. I think I was talking about the prefrontal cortex last time. So see the mirror for what it is, a social illusion of hierarchy. You recognize the mirror, the projections of ego and fear. And my advice is to respond with calm presence and not reactive aggression. If you're really in it, looking at it in spiritual and also growth within yourself, because I do recognize that in this space, people do like to perform. So apply this, my own awareness, if it helps you out in any way, shape, or form. And if it doesn't, don't worry about it. So the mastery of the mind equals the mastery of the chaos around us in this space. And the awareness and clarity are both neurological and spiritual. So, gentlemen, I can hear how much each of you wants to be understood in this space. But what I've been seeing, what's been happening this week, and particularly right now, isn't understanding. It's become competition. And competition doesn't reveal truth. It just creates noise that keeps the audiences divided. And that was my point this week. And now I've seen it turn into a new angle of revenge. And yes, some of you are extremely articulate. Let's be clear, extremely articulate. But the articulation isn't the same as the clarity that's coming from what words, what speech is being used, okay? A sharp tongue can cut truth just as easily as it can reveal it. And the real test of intelligence isn't how well we win these arguments. I think it has more to do with whether our words can cause heal or harm. Really think about that. Because I know a trend of this idea of debates online, it has, they're not putting any feeling or emotion to it. They're not thinking about if it's healing or harming anybody. But I know from my perspective, I pay close attention to that, of the healing or the harm behind my intent. Especially this week. It was a really big lesson. So when corruption and ego rule a space, which is what we are experiencing at the moment, the natural urge is to fight back. And the hard lesson, right? It just feeds that energy. It really does. And we've got a virus that runs around amongst us in this space that feeds off of this energy. And I don't even need to name who that person is. You can't clean muddy waters, folks, by stirring it. In my opinion, you're not here to win. You're here to witness in life. That's a hard lesson for me to learn because I've in that space now in my life. I haven't always been there, but I am now. I notice how quickly we turn differences into battles online. But what if we pause to ask what fear or hurts sit beneath all of that? And this brings the awareness without the shame. And in a Buddhist style, a mirror and not a sword, because I know a lot of individuals like to speak about this idea of steel sharpens steel. They're always talking about that sword. But this mirror, I think the mirror has been more of symbolism recently than any sword. So every online space is a field of pure resonance. If you embody peace and truth, others feel it even when they disagree with you. I try to anchor my words in universal values. And what I mean by that is truth and empathy and responsibility. And a hard lesson is to not use personal morality or superiority. And I've done that a lot in this space. When pride runs the show, I've learned that everyone loses sight of what the truth is in the conversation. And that's a hard pill to swallow. So scapegoating is one of the most insidious dynamics in human society. And it often thrives where people seek certainty or authority outside of themselves through religion and politics or ideologies. So awareness is the key to seeing clearly. Back to awareness. So historically and today, individuals or groups are blamed for problems not because they caused them, but because projecting fault onto them simplifies this complexity and protects these fragile egos. Religion and political ideologies can serve as crutches for this process. They provide language and rituals or symbols that justify blaming, shaming, or controlling others. Am I wrong? Or am I right? The danger lies in the illusion of righteousness. People can believe that punishment and exclusion or dominance is divinely sanctioned or politically justified, when in fact, it is fear and pride and insecurity driving the behavior. And this is a social mirage. Authority appears legitimate, morality appears to be absolute, but it is actually a projection of unresolved collective fear. We're experiencing that on a macro right now in this world. And that awareness allows us to recognize these patterns. The awareness. So, do you guys recognize these patterns as well? It allows us to see when these accusations and these judgments or this division is being weaponized, and it's being weaponized on the world scale and on a micro scale here in this digital space. It allows us to step out of this mirage when we see it and resist being drawn into the mirror of people's projections or society's projections and maintain this clarity without becoming a target or an enabler to it. And perhaps in spiritual terms, this awareness frees the mind from being a conduit for that collective ego. And in the practical terms, it protects communities from that manipulation and that division. That's my goal these days. When we cultivate this discernment and seeing the scapegoating for what it is, we refuse to participate in this and in these cycles of shame and fear, whether cloaked in in religion or politics or in these social dynamics. Okay, let's get back to this. Modern Men Lost Again says, yeah, if I can serve any positive purpose in this online space, I hope it can be to show other men that there is a time and place where it is necessary to seriously de-escalate a situation. Good luck with that, Landry. Good luck with that. Because that's a hard position to be in this space. We've been watching it happen and play itself out this week. And quite truthfully, I think you and OTW have been a really good example of pursuing this to see when it's necessary to de-escalate the situation. Hi, Fools and Tools. Much love to you too, my friend. I haven't seen you in a long time, and it's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. Okay. So I know you told me you lost your channel. You're going to have to talk. We're going to have a discussion about that. I'm going to be interviewing a friend of mine this month that has also experienced the same thing. And it's going to be really interesting. And it's going to apply to all of us in this space, especially for people who create content on their channels. Okay. There's been a huge shift in how AI works in this space. And maybe it's always been there, but there's been an update on how it functions, particularly here on YouTube. So eventually, tune in for that sometime this month. Okay. So thank you for dropping that, Miss Esra. Thank you for dropping Fools and Tools. Sub up to Fools and Tools. She has a lot of insight as well. I really enjoy Fools and Tools posts and the information in her shorts that she shares. So please go ahead and sub up over to Fools and Tools. Okay, back to Yolanda's opinions. I feel that true leadership and true wisdom and true integrity do not require the suffering of others to prove their authority. And scapegoating is a sign of weakness, and it's masquerading as power. And this awareness is the tool that reveals it. And you can see, hopefully by my example, that if it's at the right time, it seems to neutralize it, and it restores the possibility of genuine understanding and cooperation. And I think that this group has, I've been surprised to see this understanding and this cooperation. I'm actually surprised, truthfully. So even enlightened teachers walked away when the field was too corrupted. For example, Jesus left towns that rejected him, and Buddha left courts that argued. And leaving isn't defeat, it's stewardship of your energy. And sometimes your silence becomes the loudest teaching. And some of us have to do that for ourselves in this space. Breaks are good for you. And if you never come back, you have to protect your space. And I'm all for it. So, the spiritual wisdom, that insight, it isn't new. The spiritual traditions have been teaching this for millennia. Buddha taught non-attachment even to teachings or teachers. He says, be a lamp unto yourselves, awareness over obedience. And Jesus taught that truth isn't found in ritual or control. It's found in the heart and in love and in liberation from pride and judgment. And Shiva, the archetype of dissolving illusion and reminding us to destroy the ego-driven hierarchies. And in the Upanishads, realizing the self as part of the ultimate reality, and clinging to hierarchy or a tribe is clinging to an illusion. Let me say that again. Clinging to a tribe is clinging to an illusion. So think about that for a second in yourselves, in this online space, in perhaps the politics you believe in your religions, artists that you support, you name it, right? Just think about that. I've noticed in this space that some men have advocated for strict patriarchal structures, and they when I've had these conversations in these chats or on panels, they're insisting that women should submit and remain silent or avoid contributing to decisions because they claim we lack discernment and that we're too emotional. And perhaps we are, okay? But they're just as emotional in this space, so they're full of shit. I've noticed that this emotional intelligence is often dismissed in these patriarchal ideologies as weakness, but the neuroscience shows the opposite. Women, on average, demonstrate greater interhemispheric brain conductivity, enhancing social awareness and empathy and nuanced decision making. Emotional awareness is not a flaw. Think of that. Huh? It is a tool for discernment, reflection, and integrity. And discernment is not gendered. It is the product of clarity and presence and experience, qualities that cannot be monopolized by one sex. Submitting to aggression or hierarchy does not produce wisdom, it produces compliance. True influence and authority come from the mastery of the mind, and perhaps ethical awareness and grounded action, and not this volume of ego or control. Suggesting that a woman should stay silent or at home reflects a fear of surrendering control, not a reality about capability. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of this executive function and decision making, is equally capable across genders. What differs is the social conditioning. Space is dominated by patriarchal ego. It discourages women from exercising discernment so that hierarchy is preserved. My awareness of these dynamics, I think, has become very crucial for me. It allows us to see the mirage of this dominance. And again, back to this projection of insecurity and the manipulation of that social perception. I'm not submitting to fear-driven ideology. I guess it could be optional. Choosing the presence and the clarity and the integrity. It's sovereign. And in short, the emotional insight is strength. Discernment is strength. Speaking, reasoning, and guiding from awareness is strength. So this obedience to this fear, especially in this online space, that hierarchy or that patriarchal ego is actually a weakness, regardless of the gender. The question is not who should dominate. The question is who acts from that awareness I keep speaking about, and that integrity and that courage. What's up, Fire Drake? Good to see you. So let's look into the dynamics from this sacred feminine and masculine God. Okay. In early societies, the age of the mother. So before recorded patriarchal religions, ancient civilizations across Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and pre-Hellenic Europe largely revered female deities, goddesses of earth, fertility, birth, and cycles. The feminine principle was seen as life-giving and cyclical and nurturing, mirroring nature itself. And the power came from creation and balance and not domination. And communities often practiced matrilineal inheritance or held spiritual leadership through priestesses. The divine feminine represented integration, intuition with reason, emotion with form, and chaos with order. These cultures often ag- agrarian, aligned with lunar and seasonal rhythms, a yin dominant balance with introspective and receptive and flowing energy. And the shift, the rise of the patriarchal empires, was roughly between 300 and 1000 BCE. And this power structure shifted dramatically with the rise of warfare, empire, property, and ownership. Examples are the Indo-European and Semitic invasions introduced sky gods, warrior gods, and patriarchal hierarchies. The divine began to be imagined as transcendent rather than immanent, a father god above creation rather than within it. The sacred feminine was either diminished, demonized, or domesticated. And then it was turned into and seen as chaotic, dangerous, or seductive. For example, Eve, Lilith, and Pandora. The social mirror followed suit. Men became rulers, priests, and property holders, while women's roles contracted toward obedience and service. This marks the energetic turn toward a yang dominant civilization. And that was more of an outward, linear, conquest driven, rational but detached energy. Let's check out this chat. Snow, you're not the only one, my friend. Okay. That's hopefully this conversation will empower you to see the difference of what's happening in this space. Okay. I don't know. I'm not saying that this is exactly my scenario, but Snaps is writing obnoxious shit in my posts towards other people, doing his nasty, divisive, virus self that is just, he just keeps revealing himself as unwell and unhealthy with his manipulation tactics of insecurities. He's a fucking coward. GT says, I could be wrong, but I feel like feminine, masculine doesn't equal women and men. Both sexes have feminine and masculine energy within them. It's just the ratios tend to be different in the sexes. You know what? I'm glad that you said that. You're right. Because what it all stems down to is polarities of positive and negative. Okay. GT says, generally men tend to have more masculine than feminine, and the other way around is true for females, generally speaking. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's see here. So I'm glad that, okay. So this polarization of energies that we were just talking about, the GT, what I just read your comments out loud. The energetic polarization of the earth. So symbolically and in many ways, spiritual traditions, this transition was not just cultural, but it was energetic. The planet's consciousness shifted from cyclical harmony to linear control. and humanity begins to see itself as separate from nature and not part of it. And the solar principle, like logic, power, and expansion, overtook the linear principle, which was intuition, emotion, and regeneration. And this polarized the collective psyche, dominance versus receptivity, and intellect versus intuition, and spirit versus body. And the result gave us a great technological and intellectual progress, but the cost of emotional and ecological and spiritual imbalance. And I think that that's where we're at right now as a whole. This shift also mirrors the human brain's internal dynamics. The left hemisphere, the analytic and sequential controlling part of the brain, became culturally dominant. And the right hemisphere, the intuitive, holistic, empathetic side, was devalued. And the suppression of the feminine within both men and women led to a collective neurosis, a disconnection from empathy, nature, and emotional intelligence. And philosophers like Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, I didn't realize that there was a term for it, but called neurotheologians. I like that. Neurotheologians. And they interpreted this as a necessary imbalance in the human journey and a descent into duality so that integration could one day return. And I'm hoping that that's where we're at right now. I'm hoping that that's where this shift is going into. You like that? Oh no, that was a good one, wasn't it? Okay. So the rebalancing and return to this feminine principle, hopefully this may be where we're returning to. And this is where I think that people are losing their shit with the concept of New Age. Because what I've learned is that not all of these conversations that are being labeled as New Age are actually Old Age and resurfacing and being integrated back into a space where we can all talk in mass amounts in this digital space, and it's reawakening and re-emerging itself. So if you've noticed, maybe there's a rising in this awareness of empathy and sustainability and emotional intelligence, and the healing of the masculine principle through that integration and not the opposition of it, and the recognition that divinity is not male or female, but a balance of both polarities, consciousness and compassion, reason and feeling. So we're going back to that, GT, to what you had said earlier, what you wrote earlier. So the shift from goddess to God marked the world's descent into that polarity, and the current era marks humanity's effort to reunite polarity into wholeness. Let's see. Fire Drake says, disconnected, disassociated from the true nature of being human. Beautifully stated. Oh, see, Esser agree. Ooh, that's good. Distracted and disgruntled. And truthfully, I'm often made fun of for studying the brain online. I'm teased for this. And I'm not claiming to be an expert at it, but the brain is the seat of awareness. and decision making and discernment and understanding. It is essential to navigating any space, including online communities where manipulation, ego, and projection are rampant. So my curiosity is not arrogance. Speaking about what we notice, what we learn, and what helps us understand ourselves and others is not a threat. It's an invitation to clarity. And the mockery often reflects the discomfort with insight, not a failure of knowledge. I value awareness and learning, and the brain is not a toy, and understanding it is a tool for freedom and discernment in a chaotic world. And I wouldn't be surprised, truthfully, if this is why they are also putting drugs out there legally, is to mess up and muddy the waters of the brain so that we do not receive this awareness and insight. Throughout human history, every genuine path of awakening has described a moment of inner rebellion and breaking away from the conditioning and programming and this inherited illusion. And the language differs: sin, samsara, ignorance, ego, illusion. But the pattern is the same: liberating consciousness from unconscious control. In Christianity, renewing the mind, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, in Romans 12, chapter 2. And in early Christian mysticism, this wasn't about blind obedience, but mental transformation, freeing oneself from worldly conditioning of fear, pride, and greed to align with divine consciousness. And Jesus' teachings often confronted social and religious programming. It healed on the Sabbath, spoke to women publicly, and challenged temple hierarchies. His statement, "The kingdom of God is within you," is a direct call to inner sovereignty, not external obedience. In this light, Christ consciousness symbolizes the deprogramming the egoic mind through love, truth, and awareness. And in Buddhism, liberation from conditioning, or samskara, Buddha's core insight was that suffering, dukkha, arises from attachment, craving, and ignorance, all products of mental conditioning. The Eightfold Path is essentially a system of mental reprogramming right through right speech, right action, and right mindfulness. Meditation trains the mind to see patterns clearly instead of being ruled by them. And the awakened mind, Bodhi, is not one that believes more, but one that sees without distortion. So, in other words, breaking the program is the essence of enlightenment. And in Hinduism, the illusion of Maya. In the Vedic and Upanishadic tradition, the human experience is shaped by Maya, the veil of illusion that hides the true self, Atman. The mind, Manas, and senses create false identifications, which is I am my thoughts, my role, and my pain. Spiritual practices, sadhana, seeks to dissolve this illusion, aligning awareness with Brahman, the eternal consciousness behind all appearances. Shiva, as the destroyer, represents the power to break the forms and to destroy the false so that truth can emerge. So, breaking the program is symbolized by Shiva's dance, destruction as purification. And in Sufism, burning the false self, mystics like Rumi and Al-Ghazali spoke of the nafs, the ego self, as a cage of habits and false identity. The spiritual journey, let's see here if I can pronounce this correctly, Tarika, burns away layers of ego until only the pure heart, Kolb, remains. Die before you die, Rumi says, meaning dismantle the false program before physical death. This is the Sufi mirror of psychological liberation, the death of the programmed self and rebirth into conscious awareness. And in indigenous and mystical traditions, remembering the whole, many earth-centered traditions never saw the mind as separate from nature. Forgetting who we are, losing harmony with the cycles of life, is the original wound. Ritual, story, and initiation return consciousness to wholeness, what modern psychology calls integration. Breaking the program here means remembering the rhythm of creation, the heartbeat of nature within. Trauma fragments the mind, creating survival programs. Healing reconnects awareness with the body and the present moment, and integration instead of dissociation. And so spiritually, this is the resurrection of consciousness. Psychologically, it's the reintegration of the self. Let's check this chat again. Let's see here. Fire Drake. Landry says he misses you. Let's see here. Fools and Tools says, display and confuse your mind so you're not focusing on your lane and your daily thing. They want you to program into what they're doing. She continues to say, it's always keep you busy looking outside yourself and not focusing for what's really important. That's how you split in your energy. GT says, what you think of the idea of the brain being kind of like an antenna and consciousness being a frequency that the brain, aka the antenna, picks up and connects to. You know, this image that I have for my avatar tonight and for my thumbnail, unfortunately, you can't see the full thing, but that's exactly what it shows is the brain, and it has an antenna. And the wiring, it's actually quite beautiful. And unfortunately, you can't see the whole thing. But yes, the brain is the antenna. And God speaks to us through that antenna. So Fools and Tools says, watch your thoughts and your words and be kind to yourself. Even if the silent things you say in front of the mirror, your cells are listening. Yes, this is what I've been having streams on throughout the year, because I believe very strongly in self-talk and the things that you say outside of yourself and in your mind. Esra says, yes, Fools and Tools, your thoughts, emotions literally manipulate your cells. Yes. GT says a Buddha or a Jesus may have experienced themselves as the frequency while the rest of us experience ourselves as the antenna. I actually think that that's what it is. I think that it is an energetic frequency that we receive. And that is what the modern day religion or teaching is, Christ consciousness. Fire Drake says the antenna is the brain. Consciousness is how you attune and focus your antenna. Yes, we receive from these philosophies the tools to get this done. I've got a great chat tonight. This is such a great chat. I'm not used to having such great feedback like this. You know, I've had a very small, I still have a small chat this evening, but you guys are putting a lot of very powerful insights and feedback. And I'm glad that you're enjoying conversing with each other in here, because that's where my comfort space is in these chats. So I would have been all happy in this chat too. Nice and cozy. So Esra says, think of those who are missing huge portions of their brains and being fully functional adults. Good point. So many of me Oris being shifted, assessed, and relived. Ezra says, this is now backed up in science. The books, the body keeps the score, and when the body says, no, touch on this, yes, ma'am. I read, I think, the first couple of chapters this year, but I've learned that I have to tread lightly on reading other people's books out loud due to copyright. So I can only read a little bit of it at a time and then drop the information in the descriptions. But The Body Keeps the Score is really a fantastic book. And Esra is the one that suggested that book for me. And it was a really good book. So I highly suggest it. And what a great compliment. Landry says, this chat is worlds away better than most. Whoop, whoop. That's what's up. You know. That's what I'm talking about. Taking notes, MMLA. Yeah, I'm serious about this stuff. I mean what I say and what I research, and I try to apply it to myself. I'm not on that bullshit, you know, how some of these online gurus, and there's a lot of them in this space. I find it all the time. I'm like, golly, I cannot believe this. You know, people really need to wake up to this shit. But, you know, people have to figure it out and go through that journey themselves and waking up to that awareness in their minds. Let's see here. How certain can we be that this solar system is much different than the digestive system? Maybe if we change the name of that, it would be a good start. It's interesting that you said that, because my last stream, that's what I had put in there, was that solar system. But that digestive system, that's a clever play on words there, Mr. Landry. Yes, because once we are not in alignment with our mind and our body and our spirit, and we're not taking care of those things, then we can't be at peace and harmony with ourselves, and we end up with disease. Let's see here. Fire Drake says, as within, so without, young Landry, my young Padawan. Yep. Okay, so back to what I've got here. Let's see here. So let's go back to these historical structures. So, in a historical and structural sense, the Abrahamic religions, such as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, are largely patriarchal systems, though the extent and expression differ across traditions and eras. So, these historical origins, the Abrahamic religions arose in societies where male lineage, property, and leadership were prioritized. Sacred texts and religious laws often assign authority to men, whether as priests, prophets, or political leaders. And women are frequently portrayed in supporting or secondary roles, with some exceptions of revered figures like Mary or Fatima. So this structural patriarchy in Judaism, the priestly and religious hierarchy was male dominant. Leadership roles in temples and synagogues were historically reserved for men. And in Christianity, early church structures gave authority to male bishops, priests, and theologians, and women were often restricted from preaching or teaching. And in Islam, religious leadership uh, and scholars is traditionally male inheritance and testimony laws. Historically, they favor men. So these doctrinal patterns, the emphasis is on obedience, and the hierarchy and male authority reinforces these patriarchal norms. So women's roles are often framed in terms of submission uh, and domestic life or moral guardianship rather than equal spiritual authority. Male figures, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, are central examples of faith, while female figures are often symbolic of secondary. These systems valorize yang dominant qualities with logic, control, authority, and hierarchy, and the yin qualities, intuition, nurturing, receptivity, are often undervalued or constrained. And over centuries, this contributed to a cultural shift toward masculine polarity dominance, and this was reinforcing social and spiritual hierarchies. So the nuances is that many Abrahamic texts and traditions contain subtle affirmations of feminine wisdom, such as Sophia, Mary as the intercessor, and Eve as an archetype. And some modern movements within these religions seek to reclaim balance and promote gender equality. So, Abrahamic religions reflect and reinforce patriarchal structures historically and socially. And they emphasize hierarchical authority with this male leadership and obedience, and often sidelighting feminine principles through spiritual insight and reinterpretation can reclaim the balance. So, these energetic implications, the matriarchal systems often embody that yin dominant energy, back to this receptive, nurturing, cyclical, intuitive. So I think you guys kind of can see where I'm going with this. The matriarchal systems are not merely women in charge, okay? Let's get that clear. They are societies and cultures where feminine principles, which are intuition, nurturing, cyclical awareness, and community cohesion, shape governance and spirituality and social life. So these systems balance power differently than patriarchal systems and often integrate both masculine and feminine energies, valuing this collaboration and interconnectedness over dominance and hierarchy. So, matriarchal systems are not merely women in charge. Um, they're just based off of these principles that I uh, just spoke upon. Now, some of these examples of these societies are the Iroquois Confederacy, women selected leaders, the Akan in Ghana, the Minoan Crete, ritual and social prominence of women, and many Pacific Island uh, societies. Patriarchal example societies are ancient Rome, medieval Europe, Western colonial societies, modern Western nation states, and historically influenced by Judeo Christian norms. So, as I was trying to research this, I couldn't help but notice a pattern. Historically, one of the driving forces behind the genocide and colonization of indigenous peoples has been this collision between patriarchal empires and the matriarchal or the egalitarian societies. Isn't that interesting? Colonizers often viewed these systems as primitive, chaotic, or threatening to control, particularly because matriarchal structures limited centralized authority that could be exploited or co opted. The spiritual world view of indigenous peoples, emphasizing harmony with nature and intergenerational stewardship, directly challenged patriarchal hierarchies depending on exploitation, conquest, and resource extraction. And I experienced that online on a micro version. Patriarchal empires prioritized territory and resource and labor, which often conflicted with indigenous ways of life. Matrilineal land ownership or communal resource stewardship could not be easily integrated into hierarchical property systems enforced by colonizers. Violence, forced conversion, and suppression of culture were methods to erase the social and spiritual systems that resisted patriarchal domination. Patriarchal conquerors often projected fear of the unknown or fear of feminine and communal power onto indigenous peoples. Indigenous resistance, which was often non aggressive but socially cohesive, was interpreted as rebellion that had to be crushed. Generational trauma from colonization mirrors the modern manipulation and control dynamics seen online or hierarchical spaces, domination, projection, and enforcement of hierarchy. And we're experiencing it right now on a macro version in this world. We are in a state of war and dominance right now. The energetic imbalance that I noted earlier, a shift from yin holistic to yang linear dominance, was reinforced on a global scale. An erasure of matriarchal systems suppressed intuitive communal and ecological intelligence and replacing it with ego-driven, control-oriented structures. Humanity collectively lost access to this integrated consciousness that matriarchal systems preserved. So genocide and colonization were not random acts of violence, but often deliberate attempts to suppress matriarchal, communal, and spiritual aware systems that challenged these patriarchal empires. When someone speaks from calm authority and emotional intelligence and awareness, especially as a woman in a space that's unconsciously structured around dominance and hierarchy, it disrupts the social code that environments, excuse me, depend on. So my calmness exposes their insecurity. And because the ego cannot easily process that reflection, it labels me as a threat, a feminist, or manipulative. I'm not threatening their safety. I'm threatening the illusion of control that props up in their self-image. Hi, Lev. Good to see you. Great stream today, my friend. I always enjoy your insights. I think that what you have to share is important. Esra, if you have a chance, can you share Lev's, or Lev, actually you're wrenched up over here. Please drop your channel. Anybody who's wrenched up over here, please drop your channels to share with one another. Mr. Yin and Yang showed up himself. Okay. So a woman speaking about consciousness and trauma and awareness challenges this currency of dominance in these circles. And they may attack or sexualize me to reframe their dynamic, their power dynamic, either by diminishing my credibility or by objectifying me. And both tactics are meant to restore their hierarchy in this space. Spiritually speaking, this dynamic mirrors the ancient suppression of the feminine principle of intuition and empathy and creative intelligence. And I embody qualities that destabilize these rigid systems. My maternal force that heals and questions and dissolves these illusions. Patriarchal energy that is unhealed often mistakes that for chaos or rebellion because it cannot yet integrate that balance. So my awareness in this sense isn't simply intellectual, it's archetypal medicine. It brings light to what has been distorted. I'm glad you're enjoying it, Snow, because I'm tired of the way things have been in this space. And as Aluma Tommy would say, I'm sick of it. Sick of the bullshit. So let's tie this back to the brain. So from a brain perspective, people operating from fear, like I mentioned earlier in the stream, of their pride or their ego dominance are acting out of that amygdala and the limbic system, not that prefrontal cortex that I'm using right now, speaking to you in this stream, where my empathy and my logic and my reflection live. So my awareness has activated my prefrontal cortex, and it triggers dissonance in them. Their brains literally interpret my calm presence as a psychological threat. Their aggression is a primitive defense against the cognitive and emotional evolution of my conversations or my insights to them. So I'm not too much. I am precisely what systems of domination fear most: a woman aware of her mind, of her intuition, and of her boundaries. The resistance I face is a sign of the shift that I represent, from fear to awareness, and from hierarchy to dialogue, and from that ego to integration. And I don't need to fight or submit. I can simply stand as evidence that consciousness can speak for itself without me shouting. So back to Sophia. Sophia represents the archetype of conscious wisdom, integrating mind, heart, and intuition. She reminds humanity, especially in patriarchal or ego-driven spaces, that true power comes from awareness, discernment, and ethical presence, not that domination and force that they're portraying. Acting from awareness engages higher cognitive functions and not survival reflexes, and it's a skill and not a criticism. And I'm not being passive aggressive, I'm being calm, clear, and observant. I communicate directly, and again, I'm setting boundaries without escalating conflict. And my goal is the clarity and awareness and not control or hidden in any type of hostility. So to break the program is to remember you were never the program. You are awareness itself, learning to reclaim the mind as a sacred instrument and not a prison. A lot of people are stuck in their mind, imprisoning themselves and suffering with their thoughts. Here's an observation. When a space becomes driven by pride or vengeance, which we've experienced together this week, the truth is drowned by all the noise that surrounds it. And I'm not here to battle anyone, but to remind us that the conversation loses its power when love and humility leave the room. We can disagree and still seek clarity together, or we can keep proving each other wrong and forget why we started talking in the first place. And that's where I was at this week. I forgot, and I needed to be reminded. And I understand that strength feels like control, but strength without self-awareness just becomes this noise that I'm referencing. You can't lead a conversation if your only language is dominance. The louder that ego is, the quieter that wisdom becomes. So peace isn't weakness, it's what left when pride burns out. And whether or not you welcome it, it's still strength. Gentlemen, I can hear how much each of you wants to be understood, but what's happening right now isn't understanding. It's still back to that competition. And that competition doesn't reveal any type of truth anymore. It just creates noise and it keeps these audiences divided. That's been my only point this week. I'm not your opponent, and this isn't a contest. But I will not mirror your aggression either. I've learned that. That's where my awareness has to hold its ground in this experience, in this space. I understand that there are those who feel unheard, and so we raise our tones and no one's actually listening to each other, and the audience starts to choose sides. And again, the only thing that seems to really reign in that dynamic is the pride. And if peace isn't welcome, that's fine. I'll still speak from it, okay? Because peace isn't weakness. It's the only place we can actually see clearly. And really think about that. When we are at peace, then we can all see clearly with one another. It's so simple. So naming these patterns breaks that manipulative rhythm that we've been seeing, this neuro-linguistic dominance that thrives in this space. So these hierarchies, they're all a mirage in this space. When these leaders in these spaces claim that they've got some type of exclusive knowledge and they demand our obedience in their spaces, or they create these secret hierarchies behind the scenes, you're not obligated to participate or to comply with these people. I've left a lot of these spaces because of that behavior, truthfully. Okay, let's look at this chat here. Fire Drake says, it's an art form and sometimes things must be torn down to be built back up in truth and faith. And start anew and have a phoenix rising, Oh, fine lines. Let's see here. GT says, the unaware see the aware as a threat because the presence of the aware subconsciously remains the unaware that they are in fact unaware. Ignorance was bliss until they became aware of their ignorance. Okay, so that's the post that I did recently, okay, was speaking about this. And I left it there so that I could receive comments just like this, right? Because this is very insightful. And Snafu decided to come after a person in my chat for being in this state in her life right now. The unaware see the unaware as a threat because the presence of the aware subconsciously remains the unaware that they are in fact unaware. And that is Snafu Snaps right now. And the person he was speaking to is in the state of ignorant was bliss until they became aware of their ignorance. It was that simple. And what he had to say to her in my chat is absolute garbage and dominance over her. Stupid idiot. Okay. All right, where am I at here in my notes? I've had a lot to say tonight. I'm kind of surprised. Oh, I lost where I was at here in my notes. Thank you for your patience, you guys. My voice is enjoying the break as well. Right? Right, Ezra? Oh my gosh, I'm so sick of these people. Get with No, I'm not gonna they can get with my program because I'm not with theirs. They can just fuck right off. Seriously. So on with these online cult-like spaces, whether spiritual, political, or self-help in nature, often use these psychological mechanisms that directly target your limbic system, your emotional brain. Okay. They don't argue with logic, they manipulate emotion and instinct. Each of these emotional hooks releases chemicals like adrenaline, dopamine, and cortisol, training your nervous systems to crave the highs of belonging and the lows of fear. It's a literal neural addiction to emotional stimulation and control. This is what Esther drops everywhere in people's chats. And when she joins the panels, this is exactly what she's talking about. This is what cult researchers call limbic imprinting. Do you know that one, Esra? Limbic imprinting. What up, Alki? Haven't seen you in a long time, bro. Good to see you. Hope you're well. So this fragmentation happens when your critical mind, your prefrontal cortex, it's bypassed repeatedly through emotional overwhelm. So you begin to lose confidence in your own perception and you rely on the group or leaders' framing to make sense of the reality. In neuroscience terms, this is the rewiring of neural pathways through conditioning, what's often called neuro-linguistic programming or entertainment in cult psychology. This creates a feedback loop of dopamine and cortisol like digital version of trauma bonding. Your body literally begins to associate chaos with connection. Right, Esra? Prefrontal cortex shut down. Exactly. Survival mode. Epigenetics. So your instincts are trained to distrust yourself. This is the essence of fragmentation, the splitting of your natural intelligence from your emotional core. So to counter this manipulation, you must rebuild your inner architecture of discernment. Essentially, reconnecting your prefrontal cortex, your rational mind, with your limbic system, which is your emotional mind. Okay. So, in spiritual terms, cults attack Sophia's consciousness, your divine capacity to discern and to integrate. So, they fragment the inner temple, replacing direct knowing, your gnosis, with their dogma and dependency. So, the real spiritual path reintegrates your body, your mind, and your spirit. And this is restoring your sovereignty to the individual soul. The brain's limbic system reacts strongly to attention and perceived dominance. This is why online spaces feel hierarchical, even when they are mirror neurons and empathy circuits pick up on this pride and this aggression by the prefrontal cortex. So these reflections trigger reactive behavior. We fight, we defend, or we submit automatically. It all connects. I agree, Esra. Fire Drake says, artificial intelligence by destroying the language and knowledge. Babble on. Hey man, you guys are so clever with your word judo in this chat today. I am impressed. So, the mind is the temple, right? Awareness of mind from Buddha, right? Awareness of mind, non-attachment, and mindfulness train the brain to see the patterns without reacting, strengthening the PFC pathways and weakening automatic fear revenge loops. So Jesus warning against ritual without love mirrors, the modern brain's need to regulate emotional and social impulses. You transcend the limbic hijack of pride and vengeance by anchoring in purpose and moral clarity. So Shiva symbolizes the destruction of this illusion, Maya, right? Metaphorically pruning neural patterns dominated by ego and illusion. And so the Upanishads teach the recognition of Atman, self, as Brahman, which parallels neuroscience insight. When the prefrontal cortex integrates with deeper network, self-awareness, and it expands beyond the ego, connecting to a sense of universal unity. Isn't that beautiful? This is why I study all cultures. They're all saying similar things. Spiritual traditions map directly onto patterns of neural mastery and training attention, awareness, and discernment. Just looking through my notes here. My streaming skills are constantly evolving. I like the conversation. Big ups. Thank you, sir. We're all evolving. That's the goal, right? Not stagnation. Don't be dormant in the same headspace. You want to expand. And also, I got a new computer. So that helps with what apps and things that I can use for presentations. Okay. Okay, so to those who seek to dominate or manipulate or divide, your power is temporary because it depends on attention and fear. And to the audience, notice how pride fuels the division. When we chase winning arguments, we miss the point. The truth and the clarity and the understanding are what actually builds the connection. In life, in our real life, and in this online space. This is true whether in a forum or on a panel or a live stream, right? The social hierarchies are online are illusionary. I'm repeating that over and over again. They're full of shit, okay? Not all of them, but many. So the aggression is the reflection, and your calm presence is the real authority in these spaces. Truth is a deceptively simple word. Its definition changes depending on whether you're speaking philosophically, scientifically, or spiritually. So the statement, the word truth, and its misuse in these online spaces is a interesting topic in itself, right? The word truth has become one of the most abused words in our digital age. Everyone claims to have it. Few pause to even understand it. Online, truth often is treated like a personal trophy, right? A weapon of ego rather than a mirror of reality. People say, my truth, our truth, but what they often mean is my perspective, my experience, or my belief. In its purest form, truth isn't something we own, it's something we align with. Truth doesn't bend to opinion, emotion, or popularity. It's what remains when illusion, bias, and fear all fall away. And the moment truth becomes a brand, a tribe, or tool for dominance, it's no longer truth. It's manipulation wearing a holy mask. Okay? Real truth humbles the mind. It doesn't demand followers or applause. It invites awareness, dialogue, and honesty, and not obedience. So when people online claim to be truth tellers while silencing, shaming, or dividing others, remember, truth that controls isn't truth. It's insecurity dressed as enlightenment. The only truth worth following is the one that frees the mind, not the one that captures it. So, truth is that which corresponds to reality, fact, or actuality. So, something like that exists independently of personal belief, like water, H2O. Okay. Um, so, verifiable, it can be observed, tested, or demonstrated. But outside hard science, the concept of truth becomes more nuanced. Spiritually, truth goes beyond factual correctness. It's not just what happened or what can be measured. It's about alignment with reality, awareness, and an unlimited ultimate principle. Ultimate principle. So your inner truth, knowing yourself authentically, recognizing your own fears, motives, and desires honestly. Spiritual texts often equate truth with self realization, Atman, Brahman, like in the Upanishads. Universal truth, principles that govern exist consciousness, like impermanence, cause and effect, interconnectedness. These truths are constant regardless of perception and are often what mystics point to. So the alignment with consciousness or divine reality going beyond intellect or opinion. Jesus called it the truth that sets you free. Liberation from illusion, ego, and deception. And Buddha called it seeing the world as it is, free from attachment and distortion. So opinion is equal to being subjective and in subjective perspective. And the belief is internalized view that may or may not match reality. And the truth in spiritual terms is what is aligned with the way things actually are, often requiring deep awareness and discernment. Rest well, my friend. Thanks for stopping by, Esra. Take care, my friend. I didn't realize it was so late. I think I need to wrap up myself. Holy smokes. I didn't even realize how long I've been going. I've just been talking my mouth like crazy. Okay, so let's tie this all up then. So I want to just pause here and notice what's happening in this space. There's a lot of energy, pride, competition, and strong opinions. And that's fine, but it's important to see clearly what's real. So these online hierarchies can feel like control, but often they're the mirage. And the loudest voice isn't always the wisest, and the most aggressive isn't always right. So let's bring clarity back into the conversation. The only truth that's worth following is the one that opens the mind instead of capturing it. And that truth is what we can all recognize, even in the chaos of online spaces. Okay, so one last thought. If you ever find yourself doubting your perception, remember, truth invites questioning. Control demands silence. So choose the truth. And on that note, it's been a lot of fun having you all here. For those tuning in the future, I hope you enjoyed. Take care, stay safe, and be blessed.